So our housekeeper, Saida, she spoke little English. She, when she came in, she had just a scarf on, not just a scarf, she had a scarf on her head and down to ankles and wrists. And then she would, after, if men was in the room, she would have the scarf on her head. If men were not in the apartment, she could keep her scarf off. They were very friendly. We found that in Morocco, you cannot speak about religion at all. You cannot give them any brochures, any Book of Mormons, nothing. You can talk basics, faith, Allah is what they believe, is their God. So you could talk to them basic, but you cannot talk about religion at all. There was an orphanage that was there before we got there that was brought in by a church, another church, Christian group, and they started handing out Book of Mormons there, Bibles. They handed out Bibles, and the next day they were out of the country.
Oh.
You do not speak or give out anything. The branch was held in an embassy home of one of the workers, and so if the Moroccans came to the door, they were not allowed in. The neighborhood watches throughout the country. And if they were seen going into our church, we would then shut down. So it was very restricted. I felt safe most of the time. As a woman, I would travel alone. It's just the way the country is. The women there are very suppressed. And so it was, but the people were very loving and very caring. And that's just the way their culture is. Women were, like I said, they're very suppressed, and they were not allowed to do much on their own. But as an expat, I felt fine. I could say my opinion. Yes, I had some Moroccans approach me about our politics in the U.S., which they didn't like. And I was in the grocery store and asked the guy to get something down, chocolate and shell for me, because I'm short. And he said, "Oh, you're American." And they started in on me about, why did you go to this? Why are you doing this? Why is your country doing that? Why are you doing that? And I did vote for this person. I'm not even there in the U.S. right now. But another friend of his came up and said, "Let's go." So I felt threatened that day, but I did not feel threatened that day. But very easy.
Generally, I worked in the embassy. Americans are very highly regarded in Morocco. They really are. That was really an aberration to have that, because we have a good reputation there. Morocco was the first country to recognize America as a country back in the revolution. So it's interesting that they are very proud of the fact that they were the very first country to recognize America as a separate country away from Britain. And so that they have a long relationship with America. Back on her issue about her statement about women, or about the dress, it was interesting to show you the different generations there and how times are changing there. We were in Rabat, which is it's a town, it's the capital, and it's very French. The portions of it are very French. And we were walking down the street, and there were 3 women that were walking down the street. One was an older woman, and she was in a burqa, so she's totally covered. She's wearing this brown burqa over her face and all that.
Burqa just has the eyes where you can see out. The rest is completely covered.
So she was dressed like that. And then the next one was about her daughter, younger, and she had like a scarf. She just wore a scarf on her head, but the rest of her dress was what we would recognize
She
here.
had long sleeves.
Long sleeves, okay. Then they had a younger daughter who was very modern. It looked like she just came from France. I mean, she just dresses, and she just had modern dresses. I thought that was so interesting to see the 3 different generations of the different dress styles in these 3 women. The burqa thing was very Moroccan. That is a Saudi Arabian thing, all right? That's not a Moroccan thing. And so I had a Moroccan secretary who worked for me, and she said, she would be very upset. She said, those are the Saudi Arabians that they do that. That is not Moroccans. We do not dress like that. So those who are very, very conservative Muslim will push that type of burqa thing, but the most of the country is not. The idea they're all wearing veils and burqas and all that, because they really work. Anything else? Any questions? You have some thoughts here, but let's just take your questions first, and then we'll get finish my
How
comment.
many in here have had the patriarchal blessing?
Quite a few. Good. Okay, good. All right. Okay. Good to know. So I was called in January, and I have basically the goal is to try and hopefully have one blessing a Sunday. That will tire you out. I mean, to have one patriarch. I do them after church on Sunday at my house, and by the time I do one blessing, I'm pretty tired. In fact, I talked with President Meyer, said that Brother Tenney said the exact same thing to him. He said that one Sunday was enough. That was about the most that he could do. I didn't have very many when we first started out, and then recently I'm getting more patriarchal blessings. So I've been on every week this month, except the last week. I have one next week. I have 3 that when they issue the recommend, that it comes to my queue. So I have a church computer, and so when the bishop issues the recommend, it goes directly to the patriarch. So I know that you have a recommend. You then have 3 months to make an appointment with me. All right. So basically, I cannot reach out to you. So that's one thing about this calling, and it's this is your request, this is your blessing. And so you have to go to the bishop. Once you get the recommend, you get it issued, it comes to the patriarch. I cannot say, oh, hey, Susan, I saw you got a recommend, and you're going to come see me? The patriarch makes no comments or contact with the person until the person contacts the patriarch and makes the demand, to set up the appointment. So that's how we've been doing it, so far. It's been working out pretty well. But I've been interesting in our stake, this is Apple Valley Stake. Almost the first blessings I had were all older people, like my age. They're like in their 60s, 70s. People who had not received their blessings. And then had a lot of central young women that have come in, but I had no young men, interesting, until last week. Is that interesting? But the first young man who came in for his patriarchal blessing from Big Bear, and he came in 2 weeks ago. I have another application that came in, so I think that's going to change a little bit. We'll start having more young. I think what happens perhaps on the young men especially, they kind of delay it until they're ready on their mission. Because obviously they're encouraged to have their blessing before they go on their mission, but it really is wise to have the blessing before them, and there's no set age. I think you understand that for each person. It depends on your desires and your needs of when you think it's right for you to come have your patriarchal blessing. But certainly, if you get a mission call, you need to have your blessing. So that's one thing they're going to put on your form to do is you need to go and receive your patriarchal blessing before you receive your blessing. So it's been a learning experience. What's interesting about the calling is that you receive, mostly in the church, when you get a call, you get a handbook, and you talk to the person who you're replacing, and you kind of see the calling in the ward, so you kind of know how the calling's done. Not so with the patriarch, right? You're replacing someone, you don't have any interaction, there's no other patriarchs in the stake, so you're on your own. They basically give you a little handbook that has 10 pages in it, and then they encourage you to go through and read other patriarchal blessings that have been given. So when I got the call, we got my blessing, my wife's. We got the patriarchal blessing for our children. I read through those. We had your mothers and fathers. So we read the patriarchal blessings of others. And that's basically how you learn to do it. There's no instruction manual. There's no one to tell you, this is how it's done. It's interesting that there's a training video that the church put out in 2005 that I actually attended. It was for stake presidents and the patriarch. So in 2005, I was there as the stake president with Brother Tenney, who was our stake patriarch. Really interesting. That's the only training they have issued, nothing since then, and they have not remodeled the handbook since then. And President Packer, who's on this video, he starts it out, he says, this is a fabulous tape, I tell you this. It starts out as President Packer, who was president of the 12, President Nelson, who was, Elmer Nelson, President Nelson, Elder Oaks, and President Hinckley. Those are the 4 speakers on this. So this is like my all-star, my president that I love, so I love watching this video because you just really feel the spirit and receive the counsel as they're giving these patriarchal blessings. So that's it. I mean, basically from that point on, you just start giving blessings and then you learn by doing it. It's basically, yes.
What does it feel like to get the inspiration for the blessing?
I struggled with that, and I think, I've told this to President Elmore, you kind of grow in the calling, and you kind of grow. I think that as you've had priesthood experience and been a bishop and others from president, the callings, we give a lot of blessings, so you kind of know how to give blessing. So I think you're prone to kind of just start speaking or giving the blessing like you did when you were, doing the other blessings that you would give for healing and other situations there. And I learned early on that, the Lord is just, you don't start speaking and the Lord's going to fill the sentence, You need to stop and listen more before you start speaking. So what I have learned, and it's been working out pretty well, just use my swag, is that I pause quite a bit when I'm giving the blessings. So I start the blessing, and then there are certain areas that I'm looking for, and I'm going to talk about. I'll pause there, and I'm waiting for something to, the words to come from that. When that comes, then I'll speak and think of those words. Then I'll pause again before I go on, and then I'll speak those words. And so I warn those who come in. This is not like any blessing you usually receive. I'm going to pause a lot during this blessing. There will be a lot of pauses in this blessing, which is why I'm just waiting for confirmation from the Lord to make sure that what I'm saying is what He wants, said. And I have felt comfortable with that. I think I'm feeling better with that, Bishop.
In giving counsel with people who want to come in for a blessing, we talk about what the desires of their heart, what questions do they have, and I was wondering if you have anything in counsel you can give them in preparation. Obviously coming and fasting and praying and some of those things, but in preparation of getting the blessing and rereading the blessings that they have, what counsel can you give them to seek out answers to those questions for guidance?
Thank you, because it's a joint partnership between the person and the patriarch. It isn't all just on the patriarch. I think the individual, his or her desire is that she wants to receive inspiration. Those desires are important to be manifest, to the patriarch. And so one thing I've started doing, you notice in the April conference, there were 2 talks on patriarchal blessings, which is very rare. Very rarely to have blessings on patriarchal blessing given a talk at conference. The first talk by Elder Randall Bennett is really a good talk, and I like that talk. I read through it, and what I've done now is I actually photocopy that, and when people call me for a blessing, I say, before you come, would you read this talk? This is the talk by Elder Randall K. Bennett. Read. It's not a real long talk, it's like 2.5 pages, and then there's a lot of footnotes at the bottom of it. And when you come, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about that talk. Then what I do is, and it's different, every time I get one, I take a copy of that and I highlight certain sentences or paragraphs in that the Spirit tells me are relevant to this person coming in. And so when they come in for the blessing, we sit down first off and we pull that out. And I say, did you have a chance to read it? Yes. I said, okay. There are certain paragraphs here I'd like to kind of share with you, counsel, before we give the blessing. And we go through and read that. When we're done, I give them that copy and I say, take this home with you. And when the blessing arrives in the mail, then you can remember this. This isn't part of your patriarchal blessing, but as you're reviewing it later, look at this and remind you of some of the things we talked about before we gave the patriarchal blessing. That's been helpful to me, at least. I think that's made it more meaningful when they come in and we've just talked and kind of marked this talk and they have something to refer to. Later on, when they sit down and refer to the patriarchal blessing. So, a good question, Bishop. That is a good point. I think I shared this when I spoke in state conference, is that when I received my blessing, I was a student at BYU, I was 18, so your age basically. And our patriarch spoke in state conference, and the Spirit spoke to me, and I needed to get my blessing. And it was very clear that He wanted me to have my blessing, He wanted me to go to this patriarch, so the timing was good. But before, in that time, the counsel is you can fast there's no requirement to fast, all right? If you look at the handbook, and you are invited to fast if you would like. I did, because I was going to receive the patriarchal blessing. This patriarch was going to receive inspiration from me, and so I wanted to make sure that I was going to be in tune with that. So I fasted, and that was probably when I was 18, probably the most serious fast I've ever done. done. I really was. And when I prayed during that, I really wanted the blessing to be with the patriarch as he was giving that blessing. So I made that meaningful to me. All right. So that was what I did. That's not required for everyone else. It's just for you personally, how you feel you can best prepare yourself and your patriarch to receive your patriarchal blessing. So, good questions. Good questions. Can I share? Oh, go ahead. Yes, please.
In your daily life, what things do you do differently because you're a patriarch, so you can
Wow.
see revelation?
Well, fortunately, I have a very good wife here. That you have to keep the spirit in your home. There's just no doubt about that. That it makes it. I mean, the Lord, when He's calling a patriarch, He's looking at homes. He's looking at what the wife is, because she's controlling the atmosphere in the home. And so I've had a wife who has really kept the spirit in our home. And so we do all we can, to keep the spirit, to have pictures of the Savior in our home. We really strive to make sure when people come into our home that they can feel the spirit. It makes a difference. It's on Saturday, and that is the day I really do prepare very carefully for patriarchal blessing. So on that Saturday, this is just me. This is what I do. I do fast for each blessing that I do. On Saturday, there's no TV, so we watch no TV at all. Nothing on YouTube. No, I don't read the news on the internet. Nothing, because generally think you don't know what you're going to see. You know how our society is. The social media is just, you all of a sudden can innocently see something or detract from the spirit, and so I just don't want that. And so we very well fast from social media. I have not, we just stay away. We don't watch anything on the TV. And we just stay, I don't look at any social media, no posts, no anything. I just stay away from all that. I think it's important to make sure that I'm in an appropriate frame of mind and to receive the Spirit in the blessing. And so, in fact, I have a blessing today. At 3:30, there's one of the young adults that's going to be coming in here. And I'm going to be giving a blessing in the Institute room here. That'll be a first to me. I usually give them in my home, but the handbook says you can give them in other church meetings, and so we're going to do it halfway. So I'm fasting now. That's why I'm kind of stuttering here a little bit. Not that I'm hungry, but my mouth is a little dry. But I think it's important to be spiritually prepared, to receive your patriarchal blessing. Can I share with you that it's kind of follow up?
Yeah, I've just been. I know you well. And in my mind's eye, I wonder when you are in preparation and even together, and I know you like to study, you love the scriptures, but is your attempts in drawing closer to the Savior done in silence and just pondering, or do you research the scriptures? Do you spend time?
Yeah, and so that Saturday night when I'm preparing for my blessing, I mentioned this training that they had in 2005. There's a DVD. Only patriarchs can see this. It's also on the church website, just for patriarchs. I watch that every time I give a blessing because I just like the spirit that I feel. I mean, they talk about the handbook and they kind of go through things that patriarchs can do in the blessing, but it's like only like an hour and a half this training. But every Saturday night, and even I did it this morning because we were gone last night. But every time I give a blessing, I watch that video. It just brings the spirit. And interesting, I got that from Patriarch Holter's, who served here for a short period of time. Martin had to move away, but he told me that's what he did. He said, I watched that video every time I gave a blessing. I watched that from the brother, and I learned new things, but more it's just the spirit. And you just can't go wrong listening to the 4 talks by those brethren, and they're all senior apostles and the president of the church, and there's just a good spirit. That's the only time that they've ever done a training for patriarchs. Nothing since then. And President Patriarch mentioned, he says, the book that you have only has 10 pages in it. And he says, oftentimes we get recommendations, well, let's put this in the handbook, or let's change this and all that. And then this is so typical President Patriarch. He says, I look at that and we say, brethren, we shouldn't get between the Lord and his patriarchs. We can't get between the Lord and his patriarchs. And I like that comment. So it said, we represent the Lord, and he counsels us, and this is where we receive our inspiration. So it's a constant challenge, to live up to that standard, but it's coming.
And if I could ask Sister Edgeworth, what has been your experience as a transcriptionist in dealing with these and being so intimate with these blessings?
It's been a blessing. I'm not in the room when he gives the blessing, unless it's a woman, then I'm in the room, because that woman can't be alone with him. But it's interesting because I read through the blessing after he types it up, because he's a faster typer than I am. And so I read it, I pray about it before I read it. I read through it, I do grammatical errors, if there is any. And sometimes I'll say, well, this just doesn't, sentence just doesn't quite flow. But it's interesting because, I'll go through the blessing as after it's typed up, I'll go through about 2 or 3 times. And then I'll give it to him and I'll show him what I think might need some changing on it. It's not the word, it's not the content that's changed, it's just the wording. And so and then we'll talk about it. And then the next day or so, we'll talk about it again. Do you think that flowed? Is this, and I'll say, is this what you meant? Or what, meant? And so he usually has blessings on Sunday. Sorry, my voice is gone. He has a blessing on Sunday, and usually by Tuesday or Wednesday, we get it finished. And then he sends it out. They get it within a week, if even that. It's usually shorter than that. And they get the typewritten patriarchal blessing in their own home, so they can read it. And once the patriarchal blessing's done, he has to shred the papers. We delete the tape that it's done on, because he tapes it as he's talking. And so there's no record kept. Everything's gone to Salt Lake. So Salt Lake will have a copy of your patriarchal blessing for the rest of your life. So if you ever lose it, you contact Salt Lake and they can give you a copy of your blessing. Or if your parents are deceased, you can request a copy of your parents' blessings, which has been really beneficial. It's very, very sweet. My dad served in the World War II. He had a patriarchal blessing, and then when he went to serve, he got a second one, which is very rare. But they did that before they would go into the military. They would do the second blessing. But it's very sweet. We can feel the spirit in our home when, after the blessing, like I said, as we're going through it, and just feeling the inspiration from there, because we can really feel it in our home. You had a question back there? No, they don't give it. It's certain. Yeah, they have to be alive. They cannot give a blessing to somebody who's deceased. But there is other, like I said, family. You can get your family's patriarchal blessings that have passed on. But they're with the Lord. They don't need the patriarchal blessing. A good question.
Yeah. Yes, another.
Who can you share your patriarchal blessing with?
We can share. Oh, that's a really good question. In the handbook, it talks about that when you receive your blessing, it's personal for you. And so they encourage you to keep it personal for you, and to share it basically with your parents, someone or close family members, and that's pretty much it. So they encourage you not to share it with others outside of it. I had an experience after I received my blessing. I was attending BYU, and I worked with the Patriarch's daughter. I was working at the BYU Law School, and she also worked there. And he was then serving as the president of the Provo Temple. He was the very first temple president for Provo Temple after he was a Patriarch. And I got talking to her one time about it. I mentioned to her that I received my patriarchal blessing from her dad. He said, it's very interesting. He says, he's been the temple president, and he says, you would think that most bizarre questions would come from people calling up asking questions about the temple. He says, he actually had more sorrowful questions asked about patriarchal blessings, and it was something like this. My roommates and I were sitting around the room today, and we're all reading patriarchal blessings here, and in your blessing you say this. What do you mean by this? She said he was so disappointed when they would do that, because number one, the counsel is not to share your blessing with anyone outside of your personal family. And two, exactly not to do that, to compare blessings, because remember that each blessing is individual, it's personal to you, and so you're not to share it with others. And he said it's really, and when people say, well, what do you mean by this? He would say, the Lord gave you the blessing, that's for you, go to the Lord and the Lord will explain it to you. So that's, I can't elaborate more beyond what's in the blessing. Yes?
Is it because not only is this something personal, but also because it's something that, like when you say people like to compare, that someone can use that against you somehow, like use it against you somehow on what was said in that patriarchal blessing. Like if someone, I don't know, but is there a negative experience to possibly getting backlash for that patriarchal blessing?
I guess, comparison is always bad, all right? And the Lord doesn't want us to compare, we're actually, He's given it to you, so the only person you're concerned about is you and the Lord. Those are not two people you really need to be concerned about. So, and what the Lord may say, a word you may have in your blessing may be different from what it means in another blessing. Those words that are there have different meanings depending on the individual and the circumstances. So it just doesn't work. It's interesting, they don't encourage us they're told not to translate patriarchal blessings. Suppose you had a blessing was given to you in English and you'd like to have it in Spanish. They ask you not to do that. Well, I'm familiar with languages. I speak French and I don't speak Spanish. It's difficult to interpret the Spirit. That blessing was given by the Spirit, and it's difficult to interpret that between the languages. You're going to miss something if you try and do that. And so the councils do not. Now you can go to a Spanish, patriarch, get the blessing direct. So don't get me wrong. But if you have it in one language, don't translate. Do not have it interpreted. They do not want us to do that.
I just want to comment, it's much like the temple or sacred experiences, they're for you, and therefore they're sacred, not secret, but sacred.
Mm-hmm.
You don't cast your sacred things among people who may not have the understanding or the ability to understand, because, for example, when you receive revelation or spiritual experience, spiritual confirmations, those are given to you between you and the Lord. And they're really, and especially where the patriarchal blessing is a personal blessing to you. It's, as they talk about in their talk, it's the Leahona, just as Lehi had the Leahona in the desert, in the wilderness. The same thing as you. That is a sacred blessing to you, not to everybody else, and not to be shared. We had a fellow in a ward that I worked in that we were one of the temple with the widow, and he passed away of Lou Gehrig's disease. And at one time his wife started telling her things that people from the other side were telling. And she would go tell other people, and he came home one day, and she came home to him and says, I've been told I can't tell you anything else because you keep sharing it with other people. It's just for you to help you. There's sacred things that are just for you.
Yeah.
The Lord gives that to you, and it's sacred, so you shouldn't be sharing it with anyone except people who are very close to you yourself and share things of sacred nature.
Yes.
One more. Would you say that because of that sacred personal thing, that it's better to keep it to yourself for just you and not share with anyone? Even if you think, I'm really close with this person or I love this person, would you say it's better to keep it to yourself more than to want to share it? Because I would think, you could think if you're close to someone and you don't know how long that friendship's gonna last, and they could turn around and not be there, and that's something that you gave away, something personal to them.
Yeah, it's interesting that President Hinckley in talks on patriarchal blessings, he shares that idea that he has his patriarchal blessing, so he actually holds it up, and he shows it. It's only one page, so he shows that it's very, very brief. But he mentions that I'm going to share a little small portion of my blessing. I want you to know I keep this very sacred and I do this very carefully. All right? But it was a teaching moment. You know, he wanted to teach something, make a point using that story, you know, about that line in his patriarchal blessing. So in that case there, he felt it appropriate to share just that one instance there. But he wouldn't share his whole blessing. He says, I want you to know I treasure my patriarchal blessing. I hold it sacred. And yeah, I don't share this lightly with people, but I am going to share with you this small portion of my blessing because I want you to know how I've grown, you know, in my understanding of my blessing.
She had a question over here too.
I do. With a lot of people being converts to the church, may not have family members to share their blessing with, and if they have someone that is like a spiritual mentor or helping them through their conversion and working with that, would that be appropriate to discuss if they're wanting to do that? That's
I guess it's a personal choice, you know. Just bear in mind that you want to make sure it's a sacred blessing given to you as an individual. You want to make sure that it's remembered and treated that way. You ever had to say something?
I think you've got to go by the Spirit.
Yeah.
If the Spirit prompts you very strongly that you need to share just a snippet, but go by the prompting. As the prompting says no, don't. If the prompting says you can share just a little, but I would hesitate to do it.
But it's just with so many, like I run so many scripture study groups and things like that, and so many people are the only member in their entire family and have no connection to the gospel in any other way. And I've been approached at different times about that, because you helped me with learning about what my blessing may mean or something. I said, well, it's yours. And like, I don't, so it's kind of like if this is their desire, I don't know, I'd pray about it. That's what I've usually been doing, but it's just more of from the patriarch and matriarch, you know, I want to see.
I think the thing is it needs to be personal.
Yeah.
And, you know, the more you share it becomes less personal, or it becomes less
Yeah,
sacred.
exactly.
And I think that's the thing, is you have to keep it sacred. I mean, you know, it's something that it's sacred. You don't want to share too much of it.
Just a minute, to follow up with the missionaries here about sharing blessings, and I'm going to share you a personal experience with that, because we had that, and this does happen. I know why you asked that question, because missionaries were prone to do that. They'll sit around and they'll want to pull out their blessings and share it. And I had that experience. We were I was serving in Belgium, and we had like 3 other teams there, so we were in the room, and they got out their blessing. They started sharing, you know, out of their reading things from their patriarchal blessing, and the Spirit was up there, and I would not pull out my blessing. And it was interesting as they were sharing their patriarchal blessings, what they were reading. I knew my blessing was very special. I mean, I said, I am not going to share my blessing. I mean, you elders can do what you want, you know, and you can read through it. And they were questioning it. It just was not good. It was not a spiritual experience. And I was glad that didn't share mine. And I knew as I was listening to what they were sharing there, I said, you know, I really was blessed. I have a very special blessing, and I need to honor and keep it. Over here.
I just wanted to say that I think it's important, I just wanted to say that, like, I think it's important that you keep your blessings also private, because, like, not only, like, could that be your close friend, you don't know, like, if that person's gonna turn on you, that person can turn on you any given moment, but also, too, it's like, you don't want people to try to come and ruin your blessing. Because people be envy, people be jealous of you, secretly jealous and envy, so you don't always want to, unless it's somebody like, you know, that's not gonna, like, do that, and you know they have good intentions, but a lot of people don't.
No, they don't, and that's why they encourage you to keep it personal.
Yeah.
It's your blessing, the Lord is speaking to you, keep it, you know, real close. Those family member, the hand somewhere here, right in the back, yes?
So when I got my blessing, I was with Patriarch Penny, and he encouraged that I read my blessing, and that if I ever had questions,
once we give them the blessing, I mean, once the blessing is given, it's between the person and the Lord. So the patriarch is not going to comment on the blessing from that point on. You know, it's just, I can't explain what the Lord said. You know, this is what the Lord said to you, and you need to, you know, to listen to the Spirit and go to the Lord, and the Lord will give you direction to your questions. Now, it's interesting here, I guess, the time here. Sometimes we have in our blessings we don't understand sometimes, and what's in the blessing. And this is what I kind of the point I was going to share in my talk, is that I received an admonition in my blessing that not troubled me, but it was different than what I expected. And let me go through the story for you. When I met with the patriarch, he asked me, he says, what do you think you want to do for a career? And I told him, I said, all my life I wanted to be a seminary teacher. I mean, full time. I wanted to be in church education. I love teaching the gospel. I love reading the scriptures. That is just what I want to do. I mean, I think this is what I'm going to do, is, you know, go in church education. So when I received my blessing, and bear in mind, this is a patriarch I've never met before, never seen since, he didn't know me or my family, whatever. The counsel I received was, remember, and this is what we call this counsel or admonition, is remember your vocation and give to it the excellence that will make you needed and wanted because, needed and wanted, but because of your skills, but stay close to the Lord, that the Lord will bless you in your vocation. And I thought, well, that's kind of interesting. For guys who go to church education, I'm going to be close to the Lord. You know, I got that impression. I thought, well, that's kind of strange. I wonder why I got that counsel. You know? So anyway, that was the counsel I received. Well, that was my goal. All right, in my life, I went ahead, and so I became on my mission. Went to BYU, got my degree in college. Came down, and I started teaching early morning seminary. Loved it. Loved it. It was the most wonderful assignment in the whole world. And so, man, I am going to be a full-time teacher. And so to become a full-time teacher, I had to sign up for classes down at Cal State Long Beach and at the Institute. They were taught by Paul King, this was an Institute teacher who grew up, who lived in Nadine's ward in Provo. So like, we knew him so well. He knew her family. It's like, this is great. So I had to take the classes. He came and I had to do student teaching. He came and watched me teach my class in the morning. And so they're getting ready to hire teachers at the end of the year, right? So he calls me in at the end of taking my classes. He says, okay, we're ready to hire here, and you're a wonderful teacher, but the Spirit tells me this is not the career for you. We're not going to pick you up. I was devastated. I was absolutely devastated. I'm just like, this is what I've dreamed of all my life, and now I'm not going to be able to do it. So I was just so surprised that I wasn't hired. So I backed up, what are we going to do now? And so I then decided to go to law school. I went to law school, got my law degree, started working. I moved up here to the High Desert, worked in Barstow, worked in the DA's offices. My career, and I think I got more of that counsel I received from the Patriarch. But what happened in my career, which is really, really interesting, because as a lawyer, all of a sudden, I started writing articles about ethics and professional responsibility. I wrote articles for professional magazines and things. And all of a sudden, I got an opportunity to teach lawyers. Can you come and teach us, about ethics? Okay, and so they called me in to teach. Next thing you know, now I'm teaching back in Washington, D.C. I got a call. This is from the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. Can you come and we understand you have this wonderful program put together on ethics, and you come back and teach our agents. So I fly back to Washington, D.C., and I'm standing there at the FBI Academy with a room full of FBI agents, teaching on ethics, and I'm saying to myself, this is surreal. I can't believe that I'm standing in front of this group of, FBI agents, talking with them, teaching them about ethics. Well, my career went on. I mean, I just continued on. I had more opportunities to teach and to teach and teach. I ended up teaching. I've probably taught in every state in the United States. I've taught in Argentina. I went to Thailand and teaching. And then my career ended by a 3-year assignment in Morocco, where I developed training programs in counterterrorism for Moroccan agents and judges. Now, looking back at what happened here, when I read that, I thought I would be a seminary teacher. The Lord had a completely different career in mind for me. He says, "You're a good teacher. I got a different audience for you. I don't need you to teach SES. I need you to teach the law and the legal community, Morocco." And so I look back at, now when I first received that admonition, I didn't understand it. But as I've gone older and older and older, all of a sudden now I look back and think, wow, how did he know that? How did he know that? Had he just followed us, oh yeah, you'll teach the gospel, you'll be a wonderful teacher of the youth and all that. That's not what the Lord had for my career. So I've really come to appreciate how the patriarch blessings are cautious, but they give you admonition. They give you counsel on your vocation that apply to what it may be different than what your plans are going to be. Let's put it that way. My career turned out to be completely different. I could have never imagined my career I ended up with. It's just an amazing thing to me, But the Lord did. So He saw things in me that I did not know when I was 18. And that's maybe what I'm trying to tell you here is that don't be impatient. Let the Lord's timetable work in, and remember, as you read that blessing, as time goes by, words will make more sense to you as you go through and read that blessing later on. So, how about that? Any other questions? All right. Well, it's been good. Thank you for inviting us. We would appreciate the opportunity to be with you. So, I agree with my testimony that the gospel is true. God truly lives. And I'll tell you this again. I know how much, as a patriarch, how much He loves you individually. And I want to testify to you that He knows your name. That's one thing that I've done recently. Is, do you say the person's name in the blessing later? Or you address them and you start the blessing, but later on, is it appropriate to state their first name again in the blessing? And I've struggled with that off and on. I don't know. My blessing doesn't. Hers doesn't. Does yours? Hers doesn't. Our kids do. But that was when their grandfather, he was a patriarch, so that wasn't more appropriate for him. And so I've struggled with that. Is it really appropriate later on to be saying the person's first name in the body of the blessing? And that revelation came to me a couple of weeks ago. I was given a patriarchal blessing, and all of a sudden I was given the impression to this young man to say his name a couple more times in the blessing itself. And if I did that, I thought, okay, that felt good. I feel comfortable in doing that. And then I've read after that some really wonderful talks about how God knows your name. He knows you by name. Joseph, this is my beloved. Joseph. Moses, my beloved. He changed the name of Sarah to Sarah to Sarai, Abram to Abraham. Hannah Smith, her name is in the Doctrine and Covenants, in the body of the blessing. So all of a sudden I realized, if this is personal scripture, these individuals, it's appropriate to have their name in the blessing, because to remind them how much they are loved by our Heavenly Father, how much He cares for you personally. And so this is something that I've kind of learned over these past few months is, I do it every blessing. And I was just wondering right now, he didn't say my name in the blessing. As prompted, as the Spirit prompts me, I will put a personal name in the blessing, because I feel that Heavenly Father wants you to know how precious you are to Him, and you are known by Him. It's interesting, there's a talk by Elmer Maxwell, and he makes a comment, says, your Heavenly Father, God has known you for a long, long time. He has known He has known your name for a long, long time. As He has named the stars, He knows your name. He knows your trials and your struggles. That was the last words that Elder Maxwell uttered in conference. He died 2 months later. Those were the last words he uttered to remind us that God knows us personally, and He knows treasure patriarchal blessings, that you'll read them, they'll be a blessing to you. And share that with him of Jesus Christ. Amen.
But